Alright, so the wood gas truck has had some really crappy brakes lately. So this truck sat for quite a couple years before I did the wood gas conversion on it. And the brakes were soft when I started driving it. I went through, replaced both front calipers because they were seizing up, had issues. Now I'm slowly losing fluid out of the master cylinder. I've done a full brake inspection. My new calipers aren't leaking. I got new brake lines on the front. Rear wheel cylinders are not leaking, but it did give away that there's a massive problem, not only besides losing fluid, is the color. Rust. Means we got water contamination. Nice and yummy looking. So, anytime you get rust all the way up to the master cylinder, there's usually a really good possibility that that contamination forming rust inside of a cast iron cylinder, usually with either a steel or aluminum plunger, gets in, tears up the O-rings, and it starts bypassing fluid to the back and starts filling up the master cylinder. Sometimes you'll see a little snail trail of brake fluid down here. I don't have that this time, so I'm assuming all my brake fluid that's disappearing is right here in the booster. So we're going to get it all cleaned out, get this master cylinder replaced. Yep, that'd be where all the fluid's going, right out the back, just covered. Booster's all full of it. Parts availability being what it was, I don't particularly care for brake best, but the soonest I could get one. Also made quite a bit of a difference. This truck was spec'd out with 1-ton brakes, so I had to have the 1-ton master cylinder with a 15/16 bore, which is good because the extra weight of the truck, it's nice to have a little bit more brakes. I'm never going to complain about that. I already matched it up in the parts store, brought this one out, made sure I had the right stuff. Just in plug caps with no bleeders. That's okay, because I have the bleeders. Just don't think they're the right size. I'll have to mess with that. So my bleeder kit only has one, for some reason, of the correct size thread for these. These bleeder kits are always made for, you know, American vehicles, not little Korean rickshaw Japanese rigs. So I'm gonna have to bleed front and back separately, which is fine because in the master cylinder in this one, there's actually 2 separate chambers, one for the front brakes, one for the rear. So I'll just bleed the front one and cap it off, and then bleed the rear one. If you don't know how to bench bleed, this is the way that I've always found is the quickest and easiest to make it work and work well. I'm just going to fill up just the front. It's going to bubble out for a minute. I do have the master cylinder tilted down and want to work all the air back up towards the reservoir. Any blunt object does just fine for this. We're just going to pump it until we don't get any air coming out. The bore is going to start filling up. As soon as it starts burping air, you have to add a little bit more here and there. Not a big deal. You can hear the bubbles coming through. It is best if you can do this very slowly to push on the air. Because then you won't aerate the brake fluid itself. Kind of defeats the purpose of bleeding air out of the system if the fluid is full of air. Starting to get some pretty good resistance already. Put you guys up on time lapse. Got the brake master cylinder bled out, ready to throw it on. I have all the bleeders loose, let everything in the system drain out. I do have a shop air dryer system, so I shot some air through the whole system, try and get all of that old rusty crap fluid out, because we don't want to start taking out seals in the new master cylinder if that old nasty fluid makes it back up into it during the bleeding process. So everything is dry, now we're ready for reassembly. Master cylinder is all bolted up, lines are all on, the brackets are all on. I don't have anybody in the shop with me right now to help me bleed the brakes, so I'm doing an old school method, and this is not perfect, but if you're by yourself, this will probably get you by until you can get a buddy to come give you a hand. What I do, fill up the master cylinder as full as you can get it, open both of your front bleeders, let it set. It's going to take quite a while, but it will eventually gravity bleed down, and you'll start getting drips out of each one of the bleeders. Close the bleeders off, repeat for the rear. That's just a regular old school gravity bleed. Once you got a buddy, they can help you do a hydraulic bleed on it, you're all good to go. Quick and simple. I'll have brakes for the way home. Now when you're doing this procedure, it doesn't matter if you're going to do it the vacuum way that I'm about to show you, or if you're doing it with a hydraulic bleed, or if you're doing it with a gravity bleed. It doesn't really matter. Now, I'm not saying this is right, but the way that I was taught is you always start with your wheel that is the furthest away from the master cylinder. So here in America, left-hand drive, master cylinders on the left side, we would start at the right rear corner brake, and then you progressively move up closer to the master cylinder. So you go right rear, right front, left front. That pushes all the air at one time all the way as far as you can get it away from the master cylinder, and works it out of that corner. Then you only have to work out each branch of each brake line to get the last little bit out to the calipers and to the wheel cylinders, or if you have rear brakes, the rear calipers. Took about 3 hours, got fluid to both the fronts, repeated for the rear. We've ran through about 2 master cylinders worth of fluid. That means the rest of the system is filling up pretty nicely. Brake pedal is still too spongy for what I like. So another bleeding procedure you can do by yourself is if you have just a small container, fill it full of brake fluid. A lot of guys will use a clear container and a clear hose. I just use a chunk of vacuum line because that's what I got. Hooked it onto one bleeder at a time and pumped the pedal. Eventually, because this is sitting down inside of the brake fluid, it can't pull air back up into the system. So it'll eventually just push all the air into the container. So I've already gone through and did the rear brakes on the truck. Now, you would never want to reuse this fluid, and I'll show you why. Is because even though I blew the system out with air, it's going to have contamination in it. The color of this fluid is going to be rusty, I bet you. Yeah, it's got a nice rust tint to it. So we'll go through and repeat that on the front end to get a bit firmer pedal. Got our jug down there, got our line in it, breathers right here. Just crack it loose a little bit, just like you would be for bleeding it. Take and stab this guy on there. Now we're ready to go pump the pedal. I'll pump the pedal nice and slow. You should be able to hear some air burbling as it comes through the system, goes through this brake fluid and has to come back up to the top. We're just going to repeat this for about a half a master cylinder worth of fluid. Do it on every brake. Now we've hit all 4 corners. Master cylinder is topped off. Let's go ahead and give the brake pedal a push. Now there's no vacuum boost right now, so there's no assisted brakes, but I bet you that pedal is going to be rock solid and it's going to stay right where I put it. Zero creep, and the pedal is 3 inches higher than it was before I did the manual bleed into a container. So there we go. Wood burner is ready for the drive home. Thanks for watching, guys.